Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make this quilt that's called hash browns. Now the browns are kind of dull for me, so I want to do it in brighter colors. I stole this strip set from Matt's cutting area. He doesn't even have the stickers on it yet, but it's all cut out, and we're going to find some other colors that go with this. These strip sets have 20 pieces in each one. We've got nice greens here, and I'm going to put it with this one. There's a lot of shades of blue and aqua in here, and that will look really nice in this quilt. Now we need to go get an accent fabric. So we need a couple yards of an accent fabric that will match with these two. These strip sets have 20 pieces in each, and there's a variety of lights and darks inside here. You'll see them better when I open it up. But the light prints in here are going to be up against one of these fabrics, and I want something that's got blue and green. I think that's too green. That one will look really good. So this is what we're going to use as the accent fabric. The only other fabrics we need are some borders, and I'll be picking those from this section here. But I really like to make the patchwork first and hold that up against the fabrics to see what borders will really accent the quilt. So let's go on over to the workshop and get these stitched up. I'm going to open up all the strips and we'll pick out some matching sets, two at a time, and I'm going to want to mix the blue and green, and I'm going to kind of put a dark and a light together. So let's see what these look like. So we have a nice selection of darks and lights here. Some more here. So the first step for this quilt is to pick out 4 groups of 2, and they should be a light and a dark. And these are going to make our blocks that look like they have a checkerboard in the middle. All right, so I'm going to take a darker blue and put it with this green here. That's going to be one set of checker blocks. And then I think I'm going to go with this plainer blue and put it with this green. It's not technically a light and a dark, but they are 2 colors that are distinctly different. So that will make the second one. I'm going to keep matching these, and I'm going to get Matt to cut the backgrounds for us.
Hi everybody. I'm going to cut the yard and 3/8 that we need for the backgrounds. I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. A little snip there. I'm just going to straighten this out a little bit. I'm ironing this piece, and then I'm going to cut the exact size pieces we need.
I have my strips picked out for the patchwork blocks. Now, this quilt has only 2 different blocks. It's got this checkerboard block here, and I've picked out prints that have a very distinct difference between the dark and the light, because I think they'll make really nice checkerboard prints. The other block that's in the quilt is this block right here. It's got a big square of the accent with some strips around it. So those strips are also paired up, and they're all paired up right here. So for those strips, I've picked fabrics that have less contrast. They're more in the medium tones. This is one of the fun parts of making a quilt, is picking out the strips and picking what fabrics go where, and then seeing how it turns out. Now, I don't need all 40 strips that I had from these strip sets, so I've got quite a few extras right here. And we may make those up into an extra project, or I may just make some extra blocks and make the quilt a little bit bigger. We'll just see how it goes.
For this pattern, I'm going to cut out 2 different sizes of squares. One thing I like to do is push my blade right down to the floor. And that's what I think about when I cut, is pushing it down to the floor. I don't worry about the fabric at all. If I focus on pushing down to the floor, I mean, without being crazy about it, I don't want to hurt myself. But I'm thinking I'm going right to the floor. And it's very rarely when I do that I miss a cut. So now I have my larger squares and my smaller squares. I'm going to remove my smaller ones. They're cut. The larger squares have to be cut into triangles. And what I've done is just turn them, and I've lined the points up on the lines here, which makes it easier than just trying to line up the points with only the fabric. I can use those lines, which helps.
Let me show you how easy it is to make these checkerboard blocks. We're just going to take these two strips and we're going to cut them into thirds. So we're basically cutting them into 3 pieces that are about 13 inches each, and they don't even have to be exact. So I'm just going to take my scissors here and cut about 13 inches.
Now I'm going to cut point to point. There's 2 triangles there. And then what I want to do is just simply turn the board gently. Take my ruler on the opposite 2 points. Just careful, just use your eyes and line that up. Point to point. And when we're done, we should have some nice triangles for our pattern. There they are. You can cut thin or thick layers, doesn't matter. Just do what's comfortable.
These are all the pieces we need to start sewing. So I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and get started. Let me show you how fun this is to make a 9 patch with 2 strips. So I took each one of the strips and I cut it into thirds. So all we're going to do is swap these 2 out, and we're going to make a strip unit there, and we're going to make a strip unit here. So I'm going to use a small stitch length. So I have a lot of stitches, and I'm going to sew these seams with a 1/4 inch seam, and then we're going to cut them. I'm going to roughly line up the top edges. We will be cutting that straight later, so it's not a big deal if it's not perfect, but you want to use a nice 1/4 inch seam and not stretch either of the strips. And the reason I'm using a very small stitch length is because I'm going to be cutting right along that stitch line, and I don't want those seams to pull open at all. I'm going to finger press all the seams on all these units towards the dark side. So I'm just going to push the fabric that way and just draw my fingernail, or even just the pad of your finger, along that seam. Now we're just going to sew this piece onto there. Now we're going to do the same thing with these 3 pieces, and we're still going to press the seams towards the dark side. We're going to give both of these a nice steam press. They're pretty flat because we finger pressed them, and they're small so they don't tend to wobble. But I like those seams nice and flat. Now we're going to take these to the cutting board, and we are going to subcut it into 2.5 inch strips. Here's how I like to subcut these. I like to put the bottom of the strip unit on a straight line on my cutting board, and I'm going to move it about 1/2 inch beyond one of these uprights. Then I'm going to take the next piece and layer it on top. Not right on top. I'm going to move it up maybe 1 inch so that I know it's straight. But then I don't have any of my seam allowances all lined up and stacked up, making it really thick. And then we're going to cut this. If you have more, I've already stitched these, you can stack these up as well. So I'm just going to keep going because I like to cut a lot of layers and it saves me a lot of time. So I'm just going to put them all on straight lines, and I can get them cut in bulk. I've got my ruler, which I'm putting on the line on the board, and I'm going to put a weight up here because it helps me keep it steady. So all of those are cut all at once. Now we're just going to move it over 2.5 inches. And that's all we have to do. We'll just keep cutting 2.5 inches so you can see all the pieces we're getting here. Now that we have them all cut apart, we are just going to take 3 and stitch one block like that, And one block like that, another block like this, and we've got one spare part. Because we pressed all the seams to the dark side, all the seam allowances are alternating directions now, which makes it really easy to sew these together. So those seam allowances are going towards the center, and then on this strip, the seam allowances are going to the outside. That makes it really easy to match up the seams and have a really strong point there. It doesn't really matter which way you press these seams, but I find it easiest to press them to the outside. So I'm going to finger press to the outside, and then I'm going to iron it. Once you have all your 9-patch blocks finished, it's time to add the backgrounds, the corners around each block. So you're going to take one block, and this is going to get one piece on each side. And they're a little bit longer than they need to be. And that's okay, because after we sew them on, we're going to trim our block down. Here's how we're going to stitch this on. We need to have this piece centered. So we don't want to have it way up here or way down there. We want it lined up on the edge, and we can eye this up. So we want the point right in the middle of this piece here. So you can tell, just slide it up till you've got equal sized triangles there, and then just stitch along the edge. All the seams are going to go towards the outside. And you can finger press that, or you can use the pad of your finger and it'll stay in place. Now we're going to turn it around, and we're going to do the same thing here. So we're just going to line it up on the edge and then slide it up or down till these triangles look exactly the same. Again, finger press to the outside. Now we're going to add a triangle to this side. So it's the same procedure. Even up those triangles, put it right along the edge. And you'll notice here you have a little more help, because that corner of this big triangle is going to stick off about 1/4 inch, and the same thing here. So that helps you line it up. I'm going to go ahead and steam press this really flat. And you'll notice that all my pieces line up pretty well, but even if they don't, it's okay, because we're going to now trim this down to 9.5 inches. Here's the easiest way to trim this down to 9.5. Half of 9.5 is 4 3/4. So I'm going to take my 4 3/4 line, which is right here, and I'm going to put it on that tip, and I'm going to put the other end of the line right on that tip, and I'm going to cut off all the excess over here. Now I'll turn the block around and do the same thing. Still the 4 3/4 line, which is right here. Just line that up on the tip of the patchwork, top and bottom, and trim off the excess. Now we have perfectly sized 9.5 inch blocks with the patchwork centered right in the middle here. And we're going to finish that step on all of these 9-patch blocks. Then we're going to move on to the next block in the quilt, which is this one. For the next block, we're going to take these 2 long strips. They're the whole width of the fabric, and we're just going to sew them together on one long edge. And I'm again using the short stitch length, so I have a lot of stitches per inch. Now when you have these really long spans, these really long strips, you want to be careful that you don't stretch either one. You want to just set them on top of each other. I'm again going to finger press towards the darker piece. Now these are both somewhat dark. It doesn't really matter which side you press it to on these. So with these long strips, it's important to open it up and press it so that you don't get a fold over. We don't want a ditch in there. We don't want this fabric like that. We want it opened all the way up. And if we do this all the way down, even if we're not pressing really hard, It makes it really easy to iron it flat and straight. So we'll take it over to the ironing board, see how straight it came out. If you have a long board like this, you can stretch it out near the bottom, and you can use your bottom straight line as a guide. If you don't have a long board, you can get a yardstick. A metal yardstick works really well. Line it up against there, because it's possible to lay it on here like this and press it crooked. We don't want to press it crooked. Now we're going to cut this with our strip tube ruler. This pattern was written in 2005, and the strip tube ruler did not come out until 2007, so the pattern does not actually tell you how to use this ruler. It gives you all the instructions you need for cutting your triangles, but it's really much quicker with the strip tube ruler. So that's what I'm going to use. We need to use the 5 3/4 mark. So we're going to be going halfway between the 5 and the 6, and there is a little hash mark right there. So we're going to put the 5 3/4 on the edge, and then we're going to cut both sides. Here's the easiest way to cut these. I want to cut a whole line here, and I could be crooked if I just use this. So I like to put another straight ruler right up next to it, move that out of the way, and make my first cut. Now we're just going to put the ruler back on here, and then we can make our second cut. So there's very little waste. We're going to put the ruler now on this side, same mark, 5 3/4. Line it all up, and again, get your straight edge, hold the ruler down, put that up against it, move that away, and make your cut. So we're going to do this for the whole strip. Now these have to be done very carefully, so I would not recommend doing several layers at once. Do these one strip set at a time. Don't try to do it in bulk. Here's the triangles that we got from the strip set. There's 4 with green on the bottom, and those 4 are going to be going all around one block. Then we're going to take the opposite ones that have the big blue, and we'll put those on the other block. That's why you need 4 from each. You have a little bit of fabric left over. Now we're going to stitch these onto the blocks, iron it up, and trim them to size. These triangles are going to be stitched on using the same method we did on the last blocks, but I don't have any guide in the middle here to tell me if I've got it centered. So I am going to fold this in quarters and make just a little teeny ironing spot with my finger. You can use chalk if you want. I just need something to show me where the middle is. And I'm going to fold it the other way at the same time. And then I'm going to fold this piece in half also and crease its center. And then I can match those creases up, and I'll know that I have it centered. So that crease is going to go right on top of that crease, and then I can stitch it on. Now we're going to trim it to size just like we did the other ones. We're also trimming these to 9.5 inches, which means 4 3/4 right now, but there's much less left over on this one. There's just a little bit to trim off of each side. I've got some of the blocks ready here, and I can already see the quilt is really going to be a very happy quilt. So what's nice is when we sew these blocks together, these are about 1/2 inch. This intersection is about 1/2 inch from the edge. So we're not going to have to match that intersection exactly with that. The seam is going to be in here somewhere, and that's going to make it much easier to put these together. So I'm going to finish the rest of the blocks, get the rows made, get the rows put together, and then we will put some borders on it and get it all quilted up. This quilt finished up really, really quickly. The blocks There's only the 2 blocks repeated over and over. You could see the 9 patch, they're just alternated. So we have a 9 patch and then we have the background with the strips around it. One thing you want to be careful of when you're sewing the blocks together is that these are all on bias edges. But because we trimmed each block exactly to size, it was real easy to sew them without stretching anything. And the top then came out really, really nice and flat. You also want to measure the width of the quilt and cut your borders exactly that length before you sew them on. That'll help so that you don't stretch the quilt. It came out about 60 inches square, and the pattern has 3 different sizes on it. So Cozy Quilt Designs often have multiple quilt sizes in their patterns, and that's one thing I really love about it. Now, since I only used 22 of the strips from my strip set and I had 40, I used the extra strips for the binding. So if you look at the edge there, the binding is made up of 13-inch pieces of the different strips all sewn together, because 2.5 inches, that's how big I cut my binding. And I think it really added to the details on the quilt. I quilted it in an abstract pattern called Calm Waters, and it has a very watery effect. These batiks look watery already. Can't really see the quilting on the back because we've got this textured batik on the back, but it went together really, really fast, and I'm definitely going to be making more of these quilts. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed our tutorial today on the pattern called Hash Browns.